Shaka, how difficult was it when looking back over the last decade to try and pick a top 3 Liverpool players when you've got these 10 to choose from?
This was very difficult for a number of reasons. Given the parameters of this discussion and about this decade, you have some great Liverpool players who played in teams who hadn't won as much as maybe you would think, given their body of work. And then you have others, like Virgil van Dijk, who's come in and raised the bar in terms of expectation, not just for Liverpool players, but for almost centre-backs. And that has been the challenge with how do you come up with a best 3 of this current decade?
So, how did you?
Well, I started with Virgil van Dijk.
At 3?
At number 3.
And he's only been there 2 years, the
Yes.
impact that he's had.
And I think that's the thing. We are talking about a Van Dijk who's only just arrived in relative terms, but we are talking about the first defender who's won Player of the Season in English football, who's been a realistic contender for Ballon d'Or. His impact has just been that immediate and that kind of ground shaking that I think he deserves to be in this list.
What have you seen from him over the years, since the days that you and I commentated on him at Groningen, and then he went on from there? What's he improved most, and what do you like most about Virgil van Dijk?
His reading of the game. Okay. And I think it's telling. He's always had the physical attributes. Tall, strong, good in the air. Well, clearly put on size over the years.
Because he fancied himself as a guy that could just bomb forward when he was playing in the Eredivisie.
Which he doesn't do now.
No.
But when you look at Virgil van Dijk and his defending, appreciate how rarely he goes to ground. This is a player who stays on his feet, reads things, anticipates, never finds himself out of position or diving into challenge, or hardly ever finds himself out of position or diving into challenges. And that's the hallmarks of great world-class defenders that I don't think the English game has seen in earnest for quite some time.
Before we get to 2 and ultimately number 1, who's the one player that just missed your top 3 and you were thinking, I want to put him in, but I can't?
Well, who just missed my top 3 would probably be either Sadio Mane or Mohamed Salah.
Salah's not in, okay.
Given their contributions to Liverpool over the last couple of years. Listen, Salah's numbers speak for themselves. Sadio Mane is a player I simply love, and I think kind of given the front 3 and given the dynamic of this front 3 is completely underrated. But Sadio Mane is as important a cog in that front 3 as any of the others.
I'm just trying to eliminate some so I can try and guess your top 2. Please tell me. I mean, Alisson's a good goalkeeper, but don't give me this goalkeepers union thing. I'm sure you considered him, but he's not your top 2, is he? Who's 2?
You just go ahead and ask, Mr. Donaldson.
Who's number 2, darling?
Number 2, Luis Suarez.
Yeah.
And though he played in a Liverpool team that didn't deliver a league title, which we won't get into, Luis Suarez was simply unplayable. Love him, as all Liverpool fans did, or loathe him, as everybody else in football seemed to do. Luis Suarez was far too good, dare I say, for being in a team that didn't deliver on titles. His move to Barcelona didn't come as a surprise. How good he's been there is similarly unsurprising. You just have to go back and look at Luis Suarez, his goals, and the manner of his goals to understand why he's in as high as he is.
So I'm going to take a flight. I'm going to take a flight to Glasgow Airport. I'm going to go along the M8. I'm going to arrive at Ibrox Stadium.
Okay.
I'm going to find your number 1 for your Liverpool top 3 of the decade, because he's now the manager of Glasgow Rangers. Is that right?
You are. Okay. And I'm contradicting myself a little bit here, because this isn't the first of these lists. This isn't the only of these lists we're doing. We've also discussed this on ESPN FC. And my challenge always is, when you have great names like Steven Gerrard, given their body of work before this decade, trying to balance that with their performances this decade.
Yeah.
And that's a tough ask. So I'm going to contradict myself and my standing in naming Steven Gerrard here, because he has been simply fantastic this decade, but probably even better the previous decade. And the trouble for me is, if we're talking about all-time great Liverpool players, I think he's on a short list of 2.
With Stevie Nicol?
Well, no, 3. Depends if Stevie's watching this. But Kenny Dalglish and Steven Gerrard would be the short list of 2 as to all-time great Liverpool players. And with that in mind, I am more than happy to contradict myself in saying that I am looking at maybe a greater body of his work than just what we saw this decade. But make no mistake, what we saw from Steven Gerrard this decade is not to be sneezed at. But it's just, he is such a good player. He's raised the bar so high that in comparing Steven Gerrard of this decade to Steven Gerrard of last decade, maybe it doesn't quite sync up. But I'm still more than happy to have him in at number 1.
It's not a bad top 3, is it?
That's a very good top 3.
Wow, Van Dijk at 3, Suarez at 2, and Steven Gerrard at 1 for Shaka's top 3 of the decade at Anfield.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.